This is a double heart container. I didn't even know the game could do that. But as we know, Ocarina of Time is full of whimsy and joy if you just play it normally, and a complete disaster if you press the wrong buttons in the right order. As I'm sure you can tell, these hearts belong to Volvagia, the boss of the Fire Temple. When you fight Volvagia, it looks like you're fighting one dragon with two phases, a ground phase and a flying phase. You know, pretty standard boss stuff. However, the reality is there's actually two different Volvagias in this fight. They are completely separate entities running entirely different scripts that just happen to share a health pool. The game pulls some clever tricks to make you think that they're the same dragon, and for the most part, it works perfectly fine. It turns out, Ocarina of Time does this sort of thing all the time, hiding assets in walls, under floors, and just swapping them out when they need to. But Volvagia is unique in this case, because they tried to pull it off as an actual combat mechanic. Emphasis on tried. So what happens when you force both of them to exist at the same time? Well, you get this. Two heart containers stacked on top of each other in an X-crossed shape. While Volvagia is a beloved boss fight, maybe even top 5, it's also one of the best examples of what N64 development was really about, making things work just well enough so that the player doesn't notice it's held together with duct tape. So let's spend a few minutes with our old friend Volvagia, and I'll show you what happens when you force the game to prove to you how quickly it can all fall apart. Alright, let's get you up to speed. So it's pretty well known by speedrunners at this point that you can damage the flying Volvagia while the Whack-A-Mole one is out by using bombs. In randomizers, this technique is key to one-cycling the boss in the event that you don't have a Goron tunic and need to win before you, burst into flames. It turns out the flying Volvagia is only mostly deloaded, and its hitbox is still active just a few frames under the platform. For those wondering, the sweet spot is a bit closer to the rim rather than the direct center. Fellas, take note. So if you drop a bomb into the lava hole, the radial blast will reach below the platform and damage the still active hitbox. And since they both share a health pool, you can deal a lot of damage very quickly, to the point that you never even see the flying phase before the fight is over. While this alone is enough for speedrunning purposes, if we take the dev cam into the platform itself, we get a much better look at how the boss fight works under the hood. You can see the Whack-A-Mole dragon only has a half model, and moves vertically from the floor to the platform, and then back again all the way to the floor, while the flying dragon spawns in specific locations and exits the platform to fly around, coiling up just underneath the platform before switching phases. What's interesting about the flying dragon is that it's also separated into two parts, the head and the body. The body is made up of a chain of polygon segments, a kind of repeating geometry that's programmed to follow each other with a bit of a lag. When it spawns under a different hole, the console stretches the polygons in a perfectly straight line while each segment individually catches up to the last in a simple follow the leader script. As for the head, that too is a fun quirk of programming. You see, buried deep in the code for Ocarina of Time, there is a fully functional R-Wing enemy from Star Fox 64. While this enemy obviously doesn't ever make an appearance in the game itself, it's been accessible by GameShark codes and widely publicized since the game's initial release in the 90s. What's crazy about the R-Wing is that it's one of the most aggressive enemies technically in the game. It's programmed to hunt Link down no matter where he is, and harass him with lasers that have crazy range and move really fast. Amusing as it is, it does feel rather out of place in Ocarina of Time. So why is there an R-Wing in Zelda at all? This actually comes up in the Iwata Asks interview when asked about how they programmed certain bosses. I only gave Morita-san the dragon model parts, but he set it in motion immediately. It was mysterious how he could do that. Iwata responds, "You were impressed. Like, I don't get it, but wow." Takizawa then says, "Yeah, I couldn't help but ask how he did it. He said it was the same as programming for Star Fox 64. There's this scene when another fighter aircraft is tailing R-Wing and..." Iwata jumps in, "Oh that's right, it's the same. The way the fighter moves as it flies and Volvagia's movements are exactly the same." Finally, Morita says, "I could do it easily by switching in the dragon for the fighter." From the sounds of it, Nintendo needed a flight engine fast, so they basically just reskinned the Star Fox R-Wing, and as far as I can tell, slightly modified the pathing and behavior. I actually tested this myself by loading in an R-Wing side by side with Volvagia. I don't know if I would conclude that they're exactly the same. The R-Wing seems to move at a slightly faster pace, has wider arcs, is a bit more aggressive, and roams a bit more freely than Volvagia, but the bones of the programming are still clearly there. And this is why there are two Volvagias in the first place. The flying phase needed complex movement, so they used the R-Wing script, and the ground phase just pops up and down, so it's its own simple actor. This sort of method is very much the core of the N64 development philosophy. Programming shortcuts, reused code, clever tricks, taking advantage of the hardware's architecture, even across different games, just to create illusions that are small enough to fit inside of a relatively tiny cartridge, but act and feel like completely immersive and unique sequences. The N64 era was kind of a perfect storm in game development history for leveraging simple systems to do spectacular things. Of course, the problem with simple systems is what happens when you introduce a variable it wasn't expecting. Because the hardware of the N64 and the software of cartridges depend on each other to produce a playable experience, commanding the hardware from within the software quickly blurs the line between playable experience and game-breaking glitch. So now, as you can see, we have two dragons pretending to be one. Naturally, I had to see what would happen if we get them to show up at the same time. Since we know that speedrunners damage the flying dragon while the ground one is active, I wanted to test what would happen if we did the opposite. Thanks to modern tools like Ship of Harkinian, we have greater control over almost every asset in the game. One of these tools is the Actor Editor, which allows us to select and modify enemies and objects that are loaded in the room, and for the purposes of this experiment, adjust their positioning in the room. The flying dragon's coordinates were constantly changing and all over the place, so I couldn't really do anything with it. Even if you do adjust them with the dev tools, it just results in the body stretching out as the polygons struggle to catch up to the head, which is pretty fun to look at, but not necessarily groundbreaking. The ground dragon, however, has static and negative coordinates. Adjusting that actually produced an interesting result. Now, I'm not going to get too crazy. All I did was change the ground Volvagia's Y coordinates from 150 to 500. I typed 500 because it was quick and easy. No real thought behind it, just the first number that came to mind. Turns out, I got lucky. 450 was too low for the hitbox, and 550 was too high for Link to reach. 500 was the only number that truly worked. When Ground Volvagia completed its script and tried to return to the lava, it was now elevated high enough that it remained partially above ground, albeit invisible. Now give the invisible dragon a whack and boom! Two dragons are now active at the same time. It restarts its script from the beginning regardless of where the flying dragon is, and they both function at the same time. While having two Volvagias active at the same time definitely made the fight more chaotic to try and get decent footage of, it ultimately didn't affect the outcome of the fight very much. The game would just correct itself whenever the ground phase was over, and I'd have to pull Volvagia into the air again. Normally, I would lift Volvagia during its attack animation, because I didn't want to kill it and have to reset. But if you whack it first and then lift it, the actor of the invisible dragon would still be in its stunned state and can take damage from your sword or even arrows. And, since it needs to be in that stunned state to receive a finishing blow from a sword or a hammer, when you kill the ground Volvagia while a flying Volvagia is still active, the cutscene goes off script, and the game begins to panic. So, now we have two Volvagias active at once in a cutscene, and the game needs to find a way to despawn them both, drop a heart container, and spawn the warp. The ground Volvagia exits into the hole as planned, but the flying Volvagia, the one that shouldn't be there, is currently all the way at the roof dropping boulders. The cutscene shifts its focus from the ground dragon to the flying dragon, skipping a piece of the cutscene where the flying Volvagia is supposed to re-emerge from the platform. At this point, it's vital to mention that the cutscene moves Link into a specific position. The head falls right beside you and dissolves into a heart container. So far so good, nothing unusual here. But then the cutscene starts all over. Another invisible targetable flying Volvagia erupts from the platform, pathing the cutscene's movements exactly before once again dissolving right beside you. It is at this moment that the game freezes. We have just softlocked. For some reason, I really can't imagine why, the game is unable to complete the cutscene, so Link is just stuck with a shocked look on his face standing beside the heart container, completely unable to move. Now at this point, I'm sure you're noticing there's only one heart container. Let's solve that. We're going to try this again, but this time, let's give the cutscene another moment to resolve using a special condition. You see, the softlock depends on Link being in a specific position during the cutscene as well, but we can interrupt this with something called a moon jump. A moon jump is another dev tool that allows Link to elevate his own coordinates with a neat little hop, and until we touch the ground, Link is in a special busy state, which has the unique property of overwriting cutscenes. I decided to stay airborne during the entire cutscene to see if the busy state would let it finish playing out. I am, however, still locked in this one spot. I can only moonjump exactly vertically with none of the usual directional input, but the busy state does give the cutscene enough time to complete. And when I landed, there it was. A second heart container loaded directly on top of the first, forming this beautiful X-cross shape. And to be honest, I was quite shocked to see it. It wasn't really what I was expecting to happen at all, and I've never really heard of anything like it before. Personally, I think it looks magnificent, oddly beautiful in a way. I've seen glitched heart containers before, but never from a boss, and never a full heart container like this. And no matter how I try, I can't pick it up. It's only there to look at. Ocarina of Time is easily one of the most broken, overanalyzed pieces of software in existence. We've disassembled the code, we've documented every glitch, and we've broken basically every sequence imaginable. But the fact that I can just stumble into something completely new by just adjusting one parameter says a lot about how this game was actually made. Development wasn't really about writing elegant, perfect code. It was much more about creating captivating sequences and solving problems efficiently with whatever was available. They needed a dragon that could fly, so they took a Star Fox ship, taped it to a snake, and hoped the players wouldn't look too closely for a few decades. And honestly, it worked perfectly. Most players have no idea there are two dragons. They don't need to know one of them is secretly an R-Wing. They don't care that the whole thing is held together with duct tape. They just think it's a cool boss fight. After years and years of studying this game, I really thought I'd seen it all. But to this day, we're still finding new interactions, still discovering new ways the game can surprise us when we poke at it from the right angle. And I'm willing to bet, if we keep looking at it from unique perspectives, the game may still have a few new ways to break.